Deep Learning Foundations and Concepts. Chapter 1. The Deep Learning Revolution. Section 1.1. The Impact of Deep Learning. Introduction. We begin our discussion of machine learning by considering 4 examples drawn from diverse fields to illustrate the huge breadth of applicability of this technology and to introduce some basic concepts and terminology. What is particularly remarkable about these and many other examples is that they have all been addressed using variants of the same fundamental framework of deep learning. This is in sharp contrast to conventional approaches in which different applications are tackled using widely differing and specialist techniques. Medical diagnosis. Consider first the application of machine learning to the problem of diagnosing skin cancer. Melanoma is the most dangerous kind of skin cancer but is curable if detected early. Figure 1.1 shows example images of skin lesions, with malignant melemos on the top row and benign nevi on the bottom row. Distinguishing between these two classes of image is clearly very challenging, and it would be virtually impossible to write an algorithm by hand that could successfully classify such images with any reasonable level of accuracy. This problem has been successfully addressed using deep learning. The solution was created using a large set of lesion images, known as a training set, each of which is labeled as either malignant or benign, where the labels are obtained from a biopsy test that is considered to provide the true class of the lesion. The training set is used to determine the values of some 25 million adjustable parameters, known as weights, in a deep neural network. This process of setting the parameter values from data is known as learning or training. The goal is for the trained network to predict the correct label for a new lesion just from the image alone, without needing the time-consuming step of taking a biopsy. This is an example of a supervised learning problem because each training example, the network is told the correct label. Protein structure. Proteins are sometimes called the building blocks of livingisms. They are biological molecules that consist of one or more long chains of units called amino acids, of which there are 22 different types, and the protein is specified by the sequence of amino acids. Once a protein has been synthesized inside a living cell, it folds into a complex 3-dimensional structure whose behavior and interactions are strongly determined by its shape. Calculating this 3D structure, given the amino acid sequence, has been a fundamental open problem in biology for half a century, seen relatively low progress until the advent of deep learning. A deep learning model can be trained to take an amino acid sequence as input and generate the 3D structure as output, in which the training data consist of a set of proteins for which the amino acid sequence and the 3D structure are both known. Protein structure prediction is therefore another example of supervised learning. Once the system is trained, it can take a new amino acid sequence as input and can predict the associated 3D structure. Figure 1.2 compares the predicted 3D structure of a protein and the ground truth obtained by X-ray crystallography. Image synthesis. In the 2 applications discussed so far, a neural network learned to transform an input, a skin image or an amino acid sequence, into an output, a lesion classification or a 3D protein structure, respectively. We turn now to an example where the training data consists simply of a set of sample images and the goal of the trained network is to create new images of the same kind. This is an example of unsupervised learning because the images are unlabeled, in contrast to the lesion classification and protein structure examples. Figure 1.3 shows examples of synthetic images generated by a deep neural network trained of images of human faces taken in a studio against a plain background. Large language models. One of the most important advances in machine learning in recent years has been the development of powerful models for processing natural language and other forms of sequential data such as source code. A large language model uses deep learning to build rich internal representations that capture the semantic properties of language. An important class of large language models, called autoregressive language models, can generate language as output, and therefore they are a form of generative AI. Such models take a sequence of words as the input and for the output, generate a single word that represents the next word in the sequence. The augmented sequence, with the new word appended at the end, can then be fed through the model again to generate the subsequent word, and this process can be repeated to generate a long sequence of words. Such models can also output a special stop word that signals the end of text generation, thereby allowing them to output text of finite length and then halt. At that point, a user could append their own series of words to the sequence before feeding the complete sequence back through the model to trigger further word generation. In this way, it is possible for a human to have a conversation with the neural network. Such models can be trained on large datasets of text by extracting training pairs, each consisting of a randomly selected sequence of words as input with the known next word as the target output. This is an example of self-supervised learning in which a function from inputs to outputs is learned, but where the labeled outputs are obtained automatically from the input training data without needing separate human-derived labels. Since large volumes of text are available from multiple sources, this approach allows for scaling to very large training sets and associated very large neural networks. Large language models can exhibit extraordinary capabilities that have been described as the first indications of emerging artificial general intelligence.